Hi, welcome back. This is the part 2 video of the custom connectors. So in the previous video, we talked about the overview of custom connectors, why the custom connectors, and what are the different life cycle methods or life cycles available for the custom connectors, right? Last video, part one video is just a high level overview. So part two will be covering in this video. We'll be covering how to create the custom connector in the Azure portal from the scratch, and what are the ways we'll be uh, able to create the custom connector. So we can able to create the custom connector in four ways. Like we can create the custom connector from the scratch in the Azure portal. I mean, in the from the Microsoft portal, from the in the PowerAutomate or PowerApps, or we can create the custom connectors from the OpenAPI definition, Swagger JSON file formally. Then we can create the custom connector from the Azure services, and we can create the custom connector from the Postman collection. So if you have a Postman tool and if you create a collection, or if you already have a collection, you can export those collections and you can import that collection. So if you go to Power Automate or Power Apps, we'll be having the data. So inside the data section, we have a custom connectors. Click on the custom connectors and click on the new custom connectors. You will be able to see that different options available right now. So creating from blank and create from Azure services. Create from Azure services is suppose if you have a ASP.NET API, Web API, or some other Azure services, you can create a Swagger file over there, and you can import that definitions, and you can create a custom connector. Or if you have an Open API definition, we'll be talking about in the part 3 series regarding the Open API file. Suppose if you have the Open API file already existing file, you can import that file directly. Or if you have the Open API file from the GitHub or some other repos, you can import that from there. Else, if you have a Postman collection, you can import that Postman collection and create the custom connector. And finally, you can import the API, like any Open API files, Postman collection from the GitHub. Right? Currently, these are the ways we can create the custom connector. So in this part, we'll be creating the custom connector from blank. So click on create custom, create from blank. So once you clicked on create from blank, these are the options that will be available for us for creating the custom connector. We have 5 sections. First is general, second is security, third section is definitions, fourth is code, and fifth is test. Right? So in the first section, general section, we have a details like icon, specifying the icon for the character, and then specifying the descriptions. We'll be describing something about our connector, and we have option to select the on-premise data gateway. Suppose if we want to connect to the on-premise network and to any API that resides inside the company network, then we can use the on-premise data gateway, right? And we need to choose which schemes like HTTPS or HTTP, and we need to define our host URL, and we need to define our base URL, right? All these details we need to fill in under the general section. So once these general section, general information has been built, we will be going to the security. Like in the security section, we have 4 authentication type. We have no authentication, anonymous, and then we have basic authentication, API key, or 2.0, right? So in the API key, like in the basic authentication, we'll be using the username and password. In the API key, we'll be providing the API keys that are used for connecting to the security for that particular app. Under the auth, we have different identity providers. So these are the list of identity providers that are available under the OAuth 2.0, like Azure AD, Generic OAuth, Google, Instagram, etc. So for the demo, for the next part, we'll be using this OAuth 2.0 for connecting to Azure AD Active Directory, right? So these are the details available in the security section. So we'll be choosing the respective security section for connecting the API for authenticating and authorizing the API, right? So once the security information is updated, the third section is definitions. So under definitions, we have actions, triggers, references, policies. So actions is a Power Automate or Power Automate actions, right? We'll be having the actions in the Power Automate or triggers in the Power Automate. If you want to create this custom connector as an action, you can choose the action, or if you want to create the custom connector as a trigger, you can choose the trigger option. So if you choose the trigger option, we have two types of trigger, like web or polling trigger. So those two details will be used for trigger. So if you choose the action, we need to fill in the actions. Like we need to fill in the details for the request and response API. Like what kind of API we need to define the verb like get, delete, post, put, patch, etc. The request URL and query parameter, headers of the API, body of the API. All these things we need to specify it over here. One thing to note here is that visibility. The visibility section over here is to specify the user facing visibility for an action or a trigger. The values that are available for the visibility are advanced, internal, important. Important, if you select important, then the operation and parameters are always shown to the users first. If you select advanced, then the operations or the actions will be hidden under the advanced menu, like the advanced settings. And if you choose internal, then the operations are hidden from the user. So once all the details are filled in, additionally we can set up policies. Policies are something which is used to change the behavior of the actions or triggers through the configuration via the policy details during the runtime. Suppose if you want to change the host URL that has been described in the general section during the runtime, you can set up the policy, right? You can click add new policy and set the host URL during the runtime, right? You can specify that specify the new policy and you can fill in all the details. So there are various templates that has been available to choose from to specify the details on the runtime, right? There are templates available to convert an object and set the host URL or set the HTTP or header or set the query string parameter, right? These are some of the templates that are available for us to define the configurations during the runtime. The benefit of using this approach is that we can leverage the runtime values for these properties that may not be available to us by the design time. Once the API requests are defined, once the policies and other things are added, the next section is code. Custom connector developers can now add CSOP code directly with the custom connector wizard through the code details. This is a public preview. Prior to this experience, the payload transformations were limited via the policy templates that has been explained in the previous section. Now we can support more transformation scenarios without having to worry about hosting our code. Some of the examples for using this code are like if you want to send external requests to fetch additional data, like after the request from the previous sections, on top of it, if you want to send an external request to fetch additional data based on the response we get from the previous request. That can be achieved via the code. And we can do some complex operations based on the response we get from the previous API. We can do some query operations or status transformations. Like if the request is failed, we can set the status depends upon the responses, or we can handle the pagination of the responses and many more. Before writing the code, Microsoft recommend that reviewing the support classes, namespaces, and explore the additional details in the documentation. Currently, Microsoft only supports C# code, and you can write one code file per connector, per custom connector. And also, it has the maximum execution time of 5 seconds, and the file size can't be more than 1 MB. Consider all these scenarios before writing the code details in system, right? So once you tested the code locally, you can add the code in the code details as a .cs or .csx file, or paste it directly in this code details. After you add your code, you can choose which operation it should be applied to. If no operation is selected, the code will apply to all the operations. Once the optional code details is done, next part is testing the connectors. So just click on the test the connectors, and first we need to create the connector. So once all the details of the code component is there, create the connector. Click on create connector. The connector will be created if there are no errors, and after that you can test the connectors. If the connector is successful, you can use the connectors in the PowerAutomate or PowerApps, right? So this is how we'll be creating the connectors from the blank. In the next part, we'll be seeing how to create the connector from the OpenAPI definition. We'll be seeing a demo of the OpenAPI file, how to create the OpenAPI file, what are the properties and other things available in the OpenAPI file, and how to use that OpenAPI file to create the connectors. So once the connector is created, how to use the custom connectors in a flow. Catch you in the next part. Thank you.